For so long in Hypixel Skyblock, there's been one enchantment that stands alone, better than the rest. Well, at least in most situations. The Soul Eater enchantment has always been known to create some ridiculous damage in figures. However, recently people have been making a case for a different enchantment that, previously wasn't really used very much. And that would be Swarm. You'll see this enchantment coming up on way more weapons now. It's not a new enchantment, it's been in the game for a long time. However, it's always been seen as pretty much inferior to other enchantments. Swarm 5 increases your damage by 10% for each enemy within 10 blocks, and that's capped at a maximum of 10 enemies. What that basically means is if you kill a mob and there's 10 enemies in a 10 block radius of you, then you'll basically deal double damage because it'll be 100% more damage. Well, that's what you would think. More on that later into the video. As for the Soul Eater enchantment, your weapon gains 10% the damage of the last monster that you killed, and adds it at the end of your next hit. Now what I will say is the Soul Eater enchantment is on a pretty steady decrease in price. And as for Swarm, pretty much the exact opposite. So today, we put these two enchantments head to head. Okay, so we have two giant swords. They're very similar in relation to the rest of the enchantments on there. There's really not too much that separates them at all. Okay, so we have both weapons and we're just going to do a straight up damage test. Now obviously this isn't going to tell us much, but I just want to get an idea against basically the weakest mob you could possibly kill. So, first of all, with our Soul Eater Giant Sword, we're going to deal around about, let's get an actual proper hit, 437k damage. 438k, seems pretty consistent. Now with our Swarm Giant Sword, this zombie looks to be alone, so this should be a base damaging figure, which I couldn't see. Okay, let's try that again. 440k. So, maybe this zombie was in the way then. Should we try it again? 439k. That seems about right. Now, on basic mobs, these weapons deal around about the same damage. The Soul Eater obviously will deal more damage against higher tier mobs. And then to take full advantage of Swarm, ideally you want more mobs around. Now before we do any further testing, you should subscribe to the channel, become part of the 23%, there's no reason not to. Also, you should join the Discord server, it's linked in the description of every single video. Okay, we're now going to head over to the Crypt Ghouls because these have slightly more health, so in terms of Soul Eater, in theory, we should be doing slightly more damage, and this is where we might seem to see a little bit of a difference. So first of all, Soul Eater is going to deal, we try that again, 467k damage as opposed to 439, so slightly more damage. As for Swarm, it's going to be around about the same damage. Now of course, it's going to do slightly more damage considering that there's more mobs around. So, yeah, there's not a massive change though. Of course, the only thing that's going to change the damage of this is if we have more mobs around, if you know what I mean. Now, if we head over to the Zealot Bruiser hideout, we now have mobs that have substantially more health. So our Soul Eater Giant Sword is going to start to deal a lot more damage, as you can see, around about 700k. As for our Swarm Sword, once again, it's just going to depend on having more mobs around. Now, the only reason the base damage is higher is because we have Ender Slayer on this sword, so that's why it's not the same damage value as before. Now this Enderman is on its own, so our actual base damage is 523k. But if we get a swarm of Endermen together and try to test it now, in theory we should do more damage considering there's more Endermen around. That doesn't really even seem to be the case. I wonder if I can illustrate this better with high health Endermen. So our Soul Eater Sword is going to be dealing, let's see, 785. Seems really low, I don't know why the damage is so low. Anyway, yeah, 785k of our Soul Eater Sword, roughly. And then if we switch to the Swarm Sword, 530. So there's now quite a big difference. Now, of course, Swarm could be made better if there was lots of enemies around the same area. It's not always practical to sort of gather enemies up to kill, if you know what I mean. Now, I could probably foresee this being decent, maybe if you're clearing in dungeons, but at the same time, a Juju Shortbow is going to be significantly better. And at the same time, in the clearing phase, you're going to be able to do enough damage regardless of the enchantment. So if I'm being completely honest, at the moment, I can't really see a fair comparison between these two weapons. Soul Eater is way better, even like against really low health mobs, the difference is pretty minuscule. Now, if I'm being honest, on the face value, the actual description and stats of Swarm 5 seem pretty good. The description essentially alludes to a potential 100% increase in damage. However, I really don't see that displayed actually in game at all. At one point when I'd angered the Endermen and they all came running towards me, I'd say there was at least 5 of them within a 10 block, maybe even 6. And our damage was nowhere near 50 to 60% you know, better than if we just killed a lone Enderman. It's a little bit, I don't know, it's a little bit sus. You see, what's interesting is this enchantment has never been changed. It was added in October of 2020, and that's it. All they've done is add the enchantment. And realistically, it just ain't it. Considering the price of a Swarm of 5 book is 10 mil, and Soul Eater 5 is essentially double the price. Only 10 mil extra. It's a clear winner for me. Now, I myself have Swarm 5 on my 2 tier 2 blaze daggers, and I always have because I was told it was the best to have. And that kind of makes sense. When you're killing blazes, there's usually quite a lot of blazes within the area, which would basically mean you'd do more damage. Also, when I've actually read into it, so the Swarm 5 damage increase that it claims is multiplicative, so it doesn't mean that you'll actually deal 100% more damage. However, there was no change in damage when there was more mobs around me, which makes just no sense at all. However, if this enchantment actually worked as it says on the tin, if your damage was actually increased by 100%, if you had 10 enemies within, you know, a 10 block radius of you, then it would actually probably be usable and a good enchantment. But at the moment, for me, there's no competition between these two enchantments. For 10 mil extra, just buy Soul Eater. This, honestly, is useless. And also, the enchantment, I honestly think this enchantment is misleading. Why would it say, why would it word it like this when it doesn't mean that? Because like I said, on face value, that seems amazing. Now, watching this back, you'll be able to see that I deal 516k and then deal more damage when there's less mobs in the same area. Honestly, not only is the damage increase really disappointing, it seems like the enchantment doesn't even work properly. Now I've decided, just to finish things off, I just want to check 100% that Swarm isn't just for some reason actually good at killing blazes. Because so many people say to use Swarm over Soul Eater when you're doing Blaze Slayer. Now, obviously, usually you'd use the daggers, but I don't have Soul Eater daggers. So we're still going to hook them because it'll be easier if we can bring them over here. So our Soul Eater Giant Sword is going to deal us 1.1 million somehow. 767k, 747k. Now our Swarm Sword is going to deal 1.1 million, 801k. Huh, okay. Why and how? Because that was literally on its own as well. Okay, and I have 2. And our damage seems to be higher when there was only 1. Okay. I want to test this one more time. There's literally no damage change. I'm so confused as to why. Soul Eater does less damage. Okay. Okay, so yeah, if you're doing Blaze Slayer, use Swarm. It's cheaper and it does slightly more damage. Even when the mobs are alone. Which literally leaves me scratching my head. But for anything else, definitely use Soul Eater. So in conclusion, Soul Eater is better than Swarm for anything other than Blaze Slayer. For Swarm itself, I'm not sure why that is. And also, in regards to Swarm, I don't think it even properly works. Also, if Swarm was buffed to actually do what it says on the tin, then it would actually be a good enchantment. But somehow for Blaze Slayer, use Swarm, because for whatever just completely wacky reason, it actually is better and cheaper. I'm not going to lie, I've done research on this, and I'm still completely and utterly confused. Anyway, if you did enjoy today's video, make sure to leave a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next one.